On Tuesday, my office filed a criminal complaint against defendant Buck for an incident on September 11th in which he injected the victim with a large dose of methamphetamine. Fortunately, that victim lived. The latest incident is further evidence that shows a troubling and disturbing pattern, especially given that defendant Buck was aware of the dangers of his behavior and that there was an ongoing investigation into the deaths of Mr. Moore and Mr. Dean. The surviving victims' statements gave us the break we needed. It gave legally sufficient evidence to establish the charged crimes and prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt in state court. Given this new evidence, my office worked diligently with law enforcement and my prosecutors and filed 3 felony charges on Tuesday against defendant Buck. They were battery causing serious injury, administering methamphetamine, and maintaining a drug house.
As you have reported earlier this week, Ed Buck, a man known in political circles for his support of various causes in Los Angeles, was arrested Tuesday on state charges alleging that he operated a drug den, among other charges. Today I am announcing a federal case against Mr. Buck, a case that charges him with distributing methamphetamine that directly resulted in the overdose death of Jamel Moore, a 26-year-old man who died in Mr. Buck's West Hollywood apartment on July 27, 2017. As a result of the case filed last night in the United States District Court, District Attorney Jackie Lacey agreed that Mr. Buck should be transferred to federal custody to face charges that carry a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years in federal prison and a maximum of life in prison without parole. The evidence collected by members of the federal task force, which also includes the FBI, indicates that Mr. Buck brought Mr. Moore to Los Angeles for the purpose of engaging in sexual activity, and that Mr. Buck agreed to pay the victim with money and narcotics. During the investigation, Mr. Moore's mother told investigators that her son reported, months before his death, that Mr. Buck had, quote, held Mr. Moore against his will and shot him up with drugs, unquote. Investigators with the Sheriff's Department several months ago located a homeless man in a West Hollywood park who said he had heard about Mr. Buck from other men who referred to Mr. Buck as Dr. Kevorkian because he was, quote, well known for compensating male prostitutes with drug and money, unquote.
Okay, so y'all just heard that little clip right there, and I actually found it while going through my timeline on Twitter, and I landed on the Black Authority, and he posted it right there. The rabbit hole with this situation gets even deeper, and what you're looking at right here is a very current picture of Ed Buck. Now, every other picture we've seen of him before, he looks younger in the picture, but in this one, he literally looks like a corpse. He literally looks like the Walking Dead. Like, he almost reminds me of Kane from the second Poltergeist movie. I'm not even going to sit here and try to imitate him right now because it's creepy enough as it is. And even more creepy is that they said that his nickname was Dr. Kevorkian. And correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I think the Dr. Kevorkian, I think that was from that movie, The Dentist, if I'm not mistaken. It was an old horror flick from way back, I think like in the late 80s or maybe early 90s. And I think that was his name, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Y'all can correct me down in the comments. But that name alone is scary. And to even be compared to something like that is even scarier. And while I was actually like in my other video when he was talking about the guy, the latest victim who was alive, it reminded me of Jeffrey Dahmer's situation. The only difference is the cops did not take the victim to go back to Jeffrey Dahmer, unbeknownst to them of what was going on, because Jeffrey Dahmer came off as this guy who was just completely innocent when he really was a wolf in sheep's clothing. But this person was taken seriously, and that's how they got Ed Buck, because I think this guy managed to escape. But based on what I'm looking at right now, it says Democratic donor Ed Buck paid at least 10 men to use drugs for his own pleasure. This man literally had a fetish with watching men shoot up drugs, get higher than a kite, pass out, and then who knows what he was doing with them while they were in a state of euphoria or in a state of their own personal limbo. And then they end up dead. Now, you heard also in the clip where the guy said that months before that the Jamel Moore guy contacted his mother and said he was being held by Ed Buck against his will. So it's almost like a level of kidnapping that this guy had going on. He knew how to finesse them. Now, remember, the original charges would say that he would get up to 5 years and 8 months in jail, but they're looking to try to hit him where he can get life in prison with these additional charges that have yet to be announced as far as he is concerned. Hopefully, they have a strong and solid enough case to build against this demonic entity, because I refuse to call it a human being, because I don't think any human being could actually do something like this or do something like this and still be considered human. But hopefully they have a strong and solid case, an ironclad one that can send his ass up the river for good. Now, they said that they're moving him to a federal prison. So, we'll see how all of that comes out. But that just shows you right there that the LAPD, as corrupt as they are, knew what was going on with Ed Buck for years. I mean, how does this man have not one, but two people die in his home and not anybody raise an eyebrow or bat an eye at that? That's why I said it is a good thing that this third one survived, because had he had not, then Ed Buck will still be carrying on doing what he's doing. And Ed Buck is probably like the one that got away. And you know who he also reminds me of? He reminds me of Herbert the Pervert from Family Guy, the one that always kept obsessing over Chris. That's what he kind of reminds me of as well. Just an old ass geezer that got his rocks off from what seems to be, at this late in the game, gay black men. Like I said, he had a fetish for watching grown men shoot themselves up with drugs, and who knows what he did with them after they were unconscious. I wouldn't be surprised if he knew that they were dead and performed necrophilic acts, which is basically sexual acts with the corpse while they were deceased. I wouldn't be surprised. And see, because of his connections and because of the donations that this man managed to make over the years, and to whom he made the donations to, that was another way he was able to get away with all of the stuff that he was able to get away with. Only a palm-colored male could even do something like this and live to tell the tale and get away with it on multiple occasions. But you can see it says paid at least 10 men. We only know of 3 so far. So where are the other 7? They are going to have, this is going to be one hell of a trial. If this thing manages to go to a trial, this is going to be one of the biggest trials of the decade. You know how they kept talking about OJ was a trial of the century? This is going to be this generation's OJ. Except we will want this thing to be found guilty. And he deserves to be. And should he be, he deserves, like Jeffrey Dahmer, that kind of treatment. So if there's going to be any type of Christopher Scarver types behind those prison walls, make yourself be known the minute he gets off the bus. They probably going to try to put him under suicide watch. Now, see, Ed Buck is the type of person that I would not want him to commit suicide, because I can't wait for all of this stuff to unravel. Because I'm curious. I'm almost damn near intrigued about this case right here. And they need to find, they said if he paid at least 10 men, they need to find the other men, the other 7 men that he paid, because they're out there somewhere. Because they didn't specify that they are deceased. The only ones we know is the Jamel Moore and the Timothy Dean. They're definitely going to take the testimony of that third one. As far as we know, this third one living and surviving and having a good heart, apparently, and good bodily organs is what got Ed Buck in lockdown right now. Where he's exactly where he needs to be. Don't put him in no kind of rehabilitation center because he don't need help. Yeah, just leave his ass in jail until they decide what to do with him next. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments, and I will talk to you in the next one.